The hum of the old grandfather clock in the hall, a majestic piece I'd restored with my own hands decades ago, was the only sound that truly grounded me anymore. Its steady tick-tock was a counterpoint to the chaotic cacophony of my increasingly busy life, a life that, at 80 years old, was supposed to be slowing down. My workshop, nestled in the back of this sprawling, creaking house that Eleanor and I had called home for over 50 years, was my sanctuary. Every gear, every spring, every delicate hand crafted into existence within these walls was a testament to a life dedicated to the silent, intricate dance of time. Today was my 80th birthday. My son, Thomas, and my daughter Sarah had insisted on a grand celebration, a family dinner with all the trimmings. I'd seen their expensive gifts, a new designer scarf for Sarah, a high-tech golf club for Thomas, arrive in the mail weeks ago, hinting at the financial strain they were under, despite their outward show of success. Thomas, always chasing the next big tech venture, seemed to be perpetually on the brink of a breakthrough or a breakdown. Sarah, who managed a string of boutique cafes, kept up appearances, but I knew her last 3 ventures had folded. Still, they arrived with wide smiles and booming happy birthdays, smothering me with hugs that felt oddly performative. The dining room table, usually reserved for quiet meals or my solitary work spread, was laden with food I barely recognized. A caterer, no doubt. Eleanor would have fussed for days, baking my favorite lemon meringue pie. Now there was just a generic chocolate cake, tall and perfectly frosted, waiting patiently in the center of the table. Thomas raised a crystal glass, clinking his fork against it. "To Dad," he announced, his voice booming a little too loudly. 80 years young, and still tinkering away, bless his heart. Sarah, ever the poised one, added, "Indeed, Dad, we know how much this house and your work means to you. That's why we've been working so hard to ensure your future security." A ripple of unease, faint at first, prickled at the back of my neck. Future security. Eleanor had left me more than enough, tucked away securely. I had no debts, and my modest pension, combined with what I still made from custom commissions, kept me comfortable. "My future is quite secure, dear," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt, "and I intend to be tinkering for many years to come." Thomas cleared his throat, a sound that always preceded an uncomfortable truth. "Yes, well, about that, Dad. We've been talking, Sarah and I. We've got a bit of a surprise for you, something that's going to make your retirement truly stress-free." My gaze drifted to the framed photograph of Eleanor on the mantelpiece. Her gentle smile seemed to waver. I watched as Thomas pulled a large, rolled-up blueprint from behind his back, unfurling it across the dining table with a flourish. Sarah produced a stack of thick legal documents from a briefcase she'd set beside her chair. The blueprint wasn't a renovation plan. It was a topographical map of my property. My eyes immediately honed in on the dense cross-hatching and bold red lines that carved through the exact spot where my workshop, and indeed the entire back wing of the house, stood. In the bottom corner, a developer's logo glared back at me. Horizon Logistics, Future Forward. "What is this?" I asked, my voice suddenly thin, like a wire stretched too taut. Sarah stepped forward, her smile still plastered on, but her eyes, I now saw, were cold, calculating. "Dad, it's an opportunity, a monumental one. We've been approached by Horizon Logistics. They're building a new distribution hub just outside the city, and they need a direct arterial road access point. Our property, believe it or not, is perfectly situated." Thomas leaned over the map, pointing with a confident finger. "They have offered us a truly astonishing sum for the land, more than we could ever dream of. It's enough to clear all our current business challenges, and then some, and of course, secure your future, Dad." His eyes, however, flitted nervously between the map and my face, betraying a different kind of desperation. He wasn't talking about my security. He was talking about their salvation. "Astonishing sum," I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "My workshop, Eleanor's rose garden, the ancient oak in the front yard, all of it." Sarah nodded eagerly. "Millions, Dad. A multi-million-dollar offer. They want to start demolition in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. My heart felt like one of my delicate clock mechanisms, suddenly seizing up, gears grinding to a halt. Demolition. My workshop. My life's work. My sanctuary. You've already agreed?" I finally managed, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Their smiles, their happy birthdays, the catered meal. It wasn't a celebration. It was a carefully orchestrated prelude to an eviction. Thomas took a deep breath, avoiding my gaze. "We have, Dad. It was the only sensible thing to do. This house is too big for you. It's a burden. And your little workshop, well, honestly, it's not exactly bringing in the kind of money it used to. This is for the best. For everyone." "For everyone," I echoed, the bitterness a raw taste in my mouth. "Or for your failing ventures, Thomas? For your struggling cafes, Sarah?" I saw the flicker of annoyance in their eyes, the brief masks of concern slipping to reveal the avarice beneath. Sarah's voice hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. This is a practical decision. We've already signed the preliminary agreements. The full transfer goes through next month. You'll be comfortable. We've even looked at some lovely assisted living facilities, all modern with excellent care." Assisted living. The words hung in the air, cold and definitive. They weren't securing my future. They were disposing of me and everything I held dear. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about their financial salvation, paved with the bricks of my home and the shattered gears of my life's legacy. The clock in the hall seemed to tick louder now, marking not just time, but the death of my world. The clock in the hall, a sentinel of my dwindling time, hammered out its steady rhythm, each tick a hammer blow against the fragile structure of my 80 years, assisted living. The words echoed, cold and hollow, a final nail hammered into the coffin of my autonomy. My gaze swept over Thomas and Sarah, their faces now stripped bare of their performative warmth, revealing the calculating architects of my future, a future I neither wanted nor recognized. The chocolate cake, perfectly frosted and incongruously cheerful, mocked the bitter taste in my mouth. "Assisted living," I repeated, the phrase a foreign language on my tongue. So, this elaborate birthday charade was merely a prelude to my internment? My voice, despite the tremor of shock that still ran through me, held a quiet steel I hadn't known I possessed. Eleanor, in her wisdom, always said I was like my clocks, intricate and delicate, but capable of enduring immense pressure. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly, her carefully constructed composure cracking at the edges. "Don't be so melodramatic, Dad. It's for your own good. This house is a burden. And what exactly are you going to do here, alone? It's not safe." "Not safe?" I scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "I've lived in this house for over 50 years. I've rebuilt engines, restored ancient timepieces, nursed your mother through her final years within these very walls. I built this home, Sarah, brick by brick, memory by memory, and you call it unsafe?" My eyes burned into hers, challenging the lie. Thomas, ever the peacemaker, or perhaps the more cowardly of the two, stepped in. "Dad, please, it's a practical matter. The upkeep alone, it's astronomical. And your workshop, frankly, it's a fire hazard waiting to happen. All those chemicals, the dust, the open flames. Imagine if something happened. We'd never forgive ourselves." He gestured vaguely towards the back of the house, towards my sanctuary. The very thought of it being gone sent a chill through my bones colder than any winter draft. "A fire hazard?" I repeated, incredulous. "My workshop is meticulously maintained. Every tool, every solvent, every piece of wood is in its proper place. I've never had so much as a spark out of line." The accusation stung, not just for its untruth, but for its implicit disrespect of my life's meticulous work. "This isn't about upkeep, is it?" I pressed, my voice low and dangerous. "This is about money. Your money. Your failing businesses. Your desperate attempts to claw your way out of the holes you've dug for yourselves." Sarah flushed, a spot of angry red blooming on her cheekbones. "That's unfair, Dad. We're simply making smart financial decisions for the family. Horizon Logistics isn't going to wait around forever. They have other options. We had to act fast." Act fast? My laugh was short, sharp, devoid of mirth. "Without consulting the owner? Without a word to me? This isn't a smart financial decision, Sarah. It's a betrayal, a theft." Thomas's voice hardened then, losing its conciliatory tone. "Dad, look, the preliminary agreement is signed. It's done. We just need your signature on the final transfer documents. It's a formality, really. The money's already in escrow, waiting to be released once everything is finalized." My jaw tightened. "And if I refuse?" A strained silence descended upon the room, broken only by the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock. Thomas and Sarah exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them that spoke volumes of their prior discussions, of the contingencies they had undoubtedly planned. It was a horrifying realization, not just of their avarice, but of the depth of their deception, stretching back weeks, perhaps months, as they plotted their scheme. "Dad," Thomas began, his voice taking on a lecturing tone, "we have power of attorney. You granted it to us after Mom passed, remember? For medical decisions, financial emergencies." Medical decisions, yes. Financial emergencies, yes. Not to sell my home out from under me, Thomas. That was for genuine emergencies, not to bail out your misguided ventures. I cut him off, the memory of signing those papers in a haze of grief after Eleanor's death, a fresh wound. They had spun it as a necessary precaution for my old age, a way to streamline things if I ever became incapacitated. My hand still ached with the phantom touch of the pen, a signature that now felt like a brand of betrayal. I had trusted them, foolishly, utterly trusted them. Sarah stepped forward, her hand reaching out, as if to soothe me, but I recoiled. "Dad, we've already invested a significant amount of our own capital into securing this deal. We're legally obligated now. Horizon Logistics will sue us if the deal falls through, and they'll win. Do you want to see your children bankrupt, homeless, all because you're clinging to some sentimental attachment to a decrepit old house?" Her voice was laced with an insidious blend of plea and threat, playing on my paternal instincts, weaponizing my love against me. It was a cruel twist, using the very affection I held for them as a weapon to destroy my life. Decrepit, old house, sentimental attachment, each word was a barb designed to diminish my connection, to rationalize their actions, but they misunderstood. This wasn't mere sentimentality. This house was the crucible of my life, the repository of every memory, every triumph, every sorrow shared with Eleanor. My workshop was an extension of my very soul. It housed the echoes of her laughter, the scent of her rose perfume, the quiet joy of our shared evenings. I looked at the blueprint, the red lines a cancerous growth on the map of my life. 3 weeks for demolition, 1 month for transfer. The clock's ticking seemed to accelerate, counting down not to my birthday, but to the end of my world. They truly believed I was a senile old man, easily manipulated, easily discarded. A cold calm settled over me, replacing the initial shock and anger. It was the same calm that came over me when faced with a particularly complex clock mechanism, one that required absolute precision and an unwavering hand. They had made a grave miscalculation. I was old, yes, but not broken. Not yet. "You've made a mistake," I said, my voice low and steady, entirely devoid of emotion now. A very grave mistake. Thomas frowned, clearly expecting hysterics. "Mistake? Dad, this is a multi-million-dollar offer. This is the most financially sound decision we could possibly make." "Oh, I assure you," I replied, pushing myself slowly to my feet, my eyes fixed on the demolition lines on the blueprint. "It's a mistake you will both live to regret, because I will not sign. Not now, not ever. And this house, my workshop, will not be demolished." Sarah let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "And how exactly do you propose to stop it, Dad? You're 80 years old. The papers are signed. The lawyers are involved. What are you going to do? Hire a legal team to fight a multi-billion-dollar logistics corporation against your own children?" There was a challenge in her voice, a sneer barely masked. I walked over to the grandfather clock in the hall, my fingers tracing the familiar contours of its polished wood. Its steady tick-tock, once a counterpoint to chaos, now felt like a battle drum. "You misunderstand, Sarah. I don't need to hire a legal team. I simply need to ensure that certain contingencies are in place." "And I have 3 weeks, you said?" "Plenty of time to ensure that Horizon Logistics finds this property entirely unsuitable for their needs, and that your so-called preliminary agreements become utterly worthless." My gaze flicked back to them, my eyes holding a glint they had never seen before, the unyielding resolve of a craftsman defending his life's work. The battle had begun. The disbelieving laughter died on Sarah's lips, replaced by a tight, angry line. Thomas's face, usually so expressive in its anxieties, seemed to freeze into a mask of stunned disbelief. They had expected tears, desperate pleas, perhaps even a stroke. Not this quiet, unyielding defiance. "You're bluffing, Dad," Sarah finally spat, her voice sharp with a sudden chilling edge. "You can't stop this. We own the rights. We have the power of attorney. You're 80, for God's sake. What exactly are you going to do? Stand in front of the bulldozers, make a fuss on social media?" The sarcasm in her tone was a whip crack, meant to diminish, to reassert control. Thomas, recovering slightly, added, "Dad, be reasonable. This isn't a game. Horizon Logistics is a serious corporation. They won't tolerate delays. You'll be liable for damages. We'll be liable." His words, though still aimed at me, held a tremor of genuine fear for their predicament, not mine. I watched them, a profound stillness settling over me. Their inability to see beyond their own greed, their utter disregard for the sanctity of my home, was breathtaking. They saw an old man, frail and easily discarded. They did not see the architect of intricate mechanisms, the master of precision, the man who understood that even the smallest gear could bring an entire system to a halt. The clock in the hall hummed its relentless song, measuring not just the seconds, but the vast chasm that had opened between us. "You've sealed your fate, children," I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue, not with anger, but with a sorrow so deep it felt like lead. "You have misjudged me, and you have underestimated this house. It has secrets you cannot fathom, secrets that will make Horizon Logistics regret ever casting their eyes upon this property." I turned from them, the silence in the dining room growing oppressive. Their shocked faces were etched into my mind, a fleeting image before I walked away, towards the back of the house, towards my sanctuary. I heard Sarah's frustrated cry, Thomas's urgent whisper, but I didn't look back. My focus had narrowed to a single burning point, safeguarding my home. The workshop door closed behind me with a soft thud, shutting out the cacophony of their betrayal. The familiar scent of oil, metal, and aged wood enveloped me, a comforting balm. This was my domain, a place where time bent to my will, where precision and patience were paramount. My fingers instinctively traced the cold, smooth surface of a half-finished grandfather clock on my workbench. Its intricate gears lay scattered, waiting for my touch, a reflection of the chaos outside, waiting for my reordering. 3 weeks, 21 days, 504 hours, 30,240 minutes. The clock in the hall, I realized, was not counting down to my end, but to the beginning of my counteroffensive. My mind raced, not with panic, but with a cold, analytical clarity. What could make a property unsuitable for a logistics hub? Environmental contamination was one, but I was meticulous. My workshop was spotless, chemicals properly stored. No, that wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. Structural instability, possible, but hard to engineer quickly and safely. Historical significance, perhaps. But what? My gaze drifted to an old, faded blueprint pinned to a corkboard, the original schematics of this house, dating back to the late 1800s. Eleanor and I had spent years researching its history, uncovering its eccentricities. There were whispers, family legends of an old well, an underground spring, perhaps even a forgotten root cellar from a previous iteration of the property. Small things dismissed as quaint quirks, but what if they weren't so small? What if they were connected? I remembered a conversation with Eleanor years ago, a fleeting comment about the house's peculiar drainage, about how certain parts of the basement always felt damp, even after major repairs. We'd laughed it off then, attributing it to the aging foundations, but now a different possibility presented itself. An unmapped subterranean water source, a hidden aquifer, a natural spring running beneath the very footprint Horizon Logistics planned to build upon. Such a discovery would mean complex environmental impact assessments, costly rerouting of water, potential flooding issues for the massive concrete slab they envisioned. It could delay the project for months, years, or even kill it entirely. And if it could be linked to something protected, like a rare salamander habitat, or even an ancient geological formation, it would be catastrophic for their timeline. My eyes brightened, a spark of calculation replacing the weariness. This house, this land, held secrets that went beyond mere sentimentality. Secrets that Eleanor and I had playfully explored but never fully understood the implications of. Now, those secrets would become my weapons. I pulled on my worn leather work apron, my hands moving with renewed purpose. I needed to verify, I needed proof, and I needed to make sure that proof was undeniable, yet perfectly hidden until the opportune moment. My first step was the basement, not the main, finished section, but the deeper, darker part, untouched for decades, accessible only through a narrow, almost hidden door behind a stack of forgotten lumber. I grabbed my old, heavy-duty lantern and a pickaxe. The quiet tick-tock from the hall followed me, a relentless accomplice. It was time to unearth the house's oldest secrets. The game, I realized, was far from over. It had just begun. The hidden door groaned, protesting its long slumber as I forced it open. A cloud of ancient dust, thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten things, billowed out, catching the weak beam of my lantern. The air within was heavy, stagnant, a stark contrast to the circulating air in the main house. This wasn't the neatly organized basement I occasionally visited for tools or storage. This was the sub-basement, a deeper, unfinished space, rumored to have been part of the original 18th century farm structure that predated the Victorian additions. Eleanor's mother had once called it the house's forgotten belly. The descent was steep, a crude ladder bolted into rough-hewn stone, worn smooth in places by centuries of unseen passage. Each rung creaked under my weight, a symphony of decay that seemed to mock my 80 years. But my grip was firm, my focus sharp. This was an expedition, not just a casual stroll. My old work boots, scuffed and familiar, crunched on damp earth at the bottom, scattering fragments of ancient plaster and what looked like fossilized rodent droppings. The beam of my lantern cut through the oppressive darkness, revealing a cavernous space larger than I'd anticipated. Unmortared stone walls rose steeply, disappearing into the blackness above, their surfaces slick with moisture. My breath plumed in the cold air. The silence down here was absolute, broken only by the frantic thrum of my own pulse in my ears and a faint, rhythmic drip, 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 echoing from somewhere deeper within. Eleanor's words about the peculiar drainage, the constant dampness, resonated. This wasn't just a leaky pipe. This was something else. I advanced slowly, my pickaxe held ready, a surprising weight in my hand. My eyes, accustomed to the intricate details of clockwork, scanned the rough ground, searching for anomalies. The floor was uneven, a mix of packed earth and jagged rock. I noticed a subtle depression, a channel worn smooth by what could only have been a continuous flow of water. It led towards the furthest, darkest corner, where the dripping sound was strongest. As I neared, the air grew noticeably colder, a raw, earthy chill that bit at my exposed skin. The light caught a glint, a shimmering reflection from deep within a narrow fissure in the rock wall. I knelt, pushing aside centuries of accumulated debris, broken pottery shards, rusted tools, a child's forgotten wooden toy. The dripping resolved into a steady, persistent stream, not just a few drops, but a constant flowing trickle from a hidden source. I extended my hand. The water was icy, remarkably clear, and tasted faintly of minerals. This wasn't merely dampness. This was water, fresh and active, moving through the very bedrock beneath my home. I swept the lantern beam across the wall, revealing patches of verdant moss clinging to the stone, thriving in the perpetual moisture. It was a living artery beneath the house, pulsing with a quiet, undeniable force. The implications hit me with the force of a hammer blow. Horizon Logistics planned to lay a massive concrete slab over this entire area. Any significant subterranean water flow would be an engineering nightmare. It would compromise the foundation, cause subsidence, potentially flood their distribution center. They'd have to divert it, pump it, or build over it on pilings, adding untold millions to their budget and years to their timeline. And if this was a protected aquifer or fed into a public water source, the thought alone sent a jolt of exhilaration through me. My mind, once consumed by the meticulous alignment of gears, now reordered itself around geological surveying. I needed more than just a trickle. I needed proof of scale. I began to clear the debris around the fissure, using the pickaxe to dislodge stubborn stones, widening the opening. The work was slow, painstaking, and exhausting. My muscles, though still strong from years of physical work, screamed in protest. But the urgency of my purpose pushed me on. After what felt like hours, I managed to create a small, crude basin. The water pooled quickly, revealing a greater flow than I had initially perceived. This wasn't just a minor seepage. It was a bona fide underground spring, perhaps the very source of the well Eleanor had hinted at, long since buried. Its flow rate was substantial enough to be a serious deterrent. The clock in the hall, far above, remained a silent guardian, counting down. But down here, in the cold, damp heart of the house, time felt different. It felt like a resource, a weapon. I'd found my first contingency. Now I needed to prepare it for deployment. My plan was forming, intricate and precise, like the inner workings of a grand clock. I couldn't just tell them. They'd dismiss me as senile. I needed irrefutable evidence. I needed to ensure that they discovered it, under circumstances that made its existence undeniable and its implications catastrophic for their project. I would cultivate this secret, allow it to grow, to become an undeniable obstacle. I worked methodically, clearing a wider path towards the spring, examining the rock formations, looking for signs of further veins of water. My goal wasn't to expose it fully yet, but to make it ready to be exposed, to ensure its visibility when the time came. I considered how to subtly guide their engineers to this very spot, how to make them believe they had made a grand discovery themselves. It was a delicate balance of concealment and revelation. A faint sound from upstairs startled me. Thomas's voice, raised in frustration, followed by Sarah's sharp, exasperated reply. They were still at it, undoubtedly discussing my stubbornness, their unraveling plans. Let them argue. Down here, I was building my defense, brick by painstaking brick, drop by quiet drop. The future of my home, my sanctuary, depended on the secrets I was now unearthing. The 3 weeks stretched before me, a ticking fuse. I just had to make sure the explosion happened exactly where and when I intended. The cold, damp air of the sub-basement felt less like an oppressive weight and more like an ally. My pickaxe, once a heavy burden, now felt like a familiar extension of my will. I worked systematically, not digging wildly, but carefully, widening the small basin around the spring's emergence point. The water flowed steadily, an unrelenting pulse from the earth's hidden depths. It wasn't a raging torrent, but a persistent, undeniable flow that would inevitably undermine any large, flat foundation laid directly above it. A concrete slab, designed for the immense weight of a logistics hub, would crack, shift, and eventually fail if subjected to this constant subtle pressure. My eyes, trained to spot the minutest imperfections in clockwork gears, now scanned the surrounding rock. The fissure was indeed natural, a fracture in the ancient bedrock, suggesting a deep, stable aquifer rather than mere surface runoff. I noted the presence of peculiar mineral deposits shimmering faintly in the lantern's beam, telltale signs of very old, undisturbed water. This was not a temporary seepage. This was a permanent geological feature, one that would scream cost overrun to any developer. My plan began to solidify with the clarity of a precisely cut jewel. I couldn't simply expose the spring now. They would dismiss it, cap it, or try to divert it easily. I needed to make its discovery unavoidable for Horizon Logistics' own engineers, under circumstances that would maximize its disruptive potential. The challenge lay in making it seem like a natural, inevitable discovery, not a deliberate act of sabotage. My reputation as a meticulous craftsman would not be sullied by crude tactics. It would be upheld by the elegance of my countermove. My thoughts drifted to the property's original well, long since filled and forgotten, its location marked only by a faint depression in the overgrown back garden. What if this spring was connected to it, or even its true source? An active, unmapped underground water system could lead to severe legal and environmental complications for any major construction. The phrase, protected aquifer, hummed in my mind, a potential trump card. I needed to discreetly research local water rights, environmental protections, and historical geological surveys of this area. The public library, perhaps, or even some obscure online databases I remembered Eleanor delving into during her genealogical research. The tools of scholarship, not brute force, would be my allies now. After a few more hours of methodical work, clearing a wider channel for the spring's overflow into the deeper recesses of the sub-basement, I climbed the crude ladder, my muscles aching but my spirit resolute. The quiet drip, drip, drip of the spring seemed to follow me, a secret heartbeat beneath the house. As I emerged, blinking, into the relative brightness of the workshop, the clock in the hall seemed to resume its louder, more insistent ticking. I heard voices from the dining room. Thomas and Sarah, they were still there, undoubtedly stewing over my defiance. "Dad!" Sarah's voice, sharp and exasperated, cut through the quiet. "We need to talk. This is ridiculous." I walked out, wiping my grimy hands on a rag, feigning an air of dismissive weariness. They stood by the dining table, their faces flushed with a mix of anger and bewilderment. The blueprint, still unfurled, mocked them with its stark red lines. "There's nothing to talk about, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "My position is clear. I will not sign, and this house will not be demolished." Thomas stepped forward, his expression a tight mask of forced patience. "Dad, please. We understand you're upset, but you don't understand the legal ramifications here. Horizon Logistics. They will not hesitate to pursue damages. You're putting us in an impossible situation. Do you want to see us lose everything?" I met his gaze, holding it steady. "I believe I made myself clear. The terms under which I granted you power of attorney do not extend to selling my home, and I am of sound mind, perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. If Horizon Logistics has a problem, they can take it up with me. But they won't, because this property will prove to be unsuitable." Sarah scoffed, a brittle, humorless sound. "Unsuitable? Because you say so? What are you going to do, Dad? Claim it's haunted?" A faint smile touched my lips, a dangerous glint in my eyes. Something far more substantial, Sarah. Something that will make their engineers shudder at the very thought of laying concrete on this land. You've signed a preliminary agreement, yes, but you haven't sold the land, not yet. And rest assured, the due diligence period for Horizon Logistics will reveal something they wish they had known before offering their astonishing sum. I would subtly ensure that their routine surveys, perhaps a seemingly innocent soil sample or ground-penetrating radar scan, would lead them straight to my discovery. Their faces paled slightly. They were not stupid, merely greedy and desperate. They knew that major development projects hinged on thorough environmental and geological surveys. They knew that unexpected subterranean water could derail even the most well-funded plans. My calm certainty, so different from the emotional outburst they expected, began to chip away at their manufactured confidence. "You're still bluffing," Thomas insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. He fidgeted, his eyes darting to the blueprint, then to the floor. "Am I?" I asked softly, letting the question hang in the air, weighted by the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock. "You have 3 weeks, Thomas. 3 weeks until they begin their full-site surveys, until their engineers arrive. Plenty of time for this house to reveal its true nature. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." I turned and walked back into my workshop, leaving them standing amidst the ruins of their carefully laid plans. The quiet click of the latch echoed their growing unease. My focus shifted immediately to the next phase. Discreetly gathering the information I needed and preparing the subtle triggers that would guide their engineers to the hidden spring. The clock's tempo was no longer a countdown to my defeat, but a measured pace towards their inevitable discovery. Every tick was a step closer to victory. The quiet hum of the workshop, so different from the oppressive silence of the sub-basement, enveloped me. My hands, still slightly grimy from the earth, felt a renewed purpose. I was a clockmaker, yes, but a craftsman of life too, and this house, my life's grandest mechanism, demanded my most intricate attention. 3 weeks. The time was a precious commodity, each minute ticking away, demanding strategic action. My first task was the research. Eleanor's old study, largely untouched since her passing, held a treasure trove of forgotten knowledge. She had a prodigious intellect and an insatiable curiosity, especially for local history and geology. I remembered her poring over dusty maps, old county records, and even obscure academic papers from the regional university. I spent the rest of that evening, and much of the following day, sifting through her meticulous archives. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and Eleanor's faint lavender perfume. I found what I was looking for, a geological survey from the 1930s, yellowed and brittle, detailing the subterranean water systems of the county. There it was, marked faintly in a corner. Possible unmapped spring activity, Old Miller Homestead, our property's original name. More importantly, I found a printout of an obscure 1980s Environmental Protection Act, vaguely remembered from a local news report, concerning previously undocumented natural water sources feeding into the regional watershed. If this spring fed into a protected watershed, Horizon Logistics would face a bureaucratic nightmare of environmental assessments and permits, potentially delaying their project indefinitely or rendering it non-viable. I also located Eleanor's old desktop computer, a relic from the early 2000s but still functional. Her meticulous filing system, organized with a librarian's precision, yielded a gold mine. Saved links to historical societies, local council planning documents, and an extensive collection of digitalized maps. I cross-referenced the 1930s survey with more modern topographical data, confirming that the spring's probable course ran directly beneath where Horizon Logistics planned their main warehouse and arterial road. The evidence was building, piece by meticulous piece, like the components of a complex movement. The next day, with my head buzzing with geological strata and environmental regulations, I returned to the sub-basement. My goal now was to create subtle, yet undeniable evidence of the spring's activity for any professional surveyor. I didn't want to damage anything, just to make the existing features more obvious, less likely to be dismissed as mere dampness. I started by clearing a wider area around the spring's emergence, not with brute force, but with the precise movements of a sculptor. I gently removed loose stones, centuries of silt, and decaying organic matter, exposing more of the moss-covered, water-slicked rock face. The water flow, though still a trickle, now had a clearer, more defined channel. I used a small hand trowel to subtly deepen a natural depression in the earthen floor, creating a clearer, albeit small, pool for the water to collect. This would make it easier for their equipment to detect moisture, and for their eyes to see the perpetual wetness. I also strategically placed a few of the more peculiar mineral-encrusted rocks I'd found deeper within the sub-basement near the spring's opening. These unique geological formations would hopefully pique the interest of a knowledgeable surveyor, indicating something more significant than a simple leak. It was like setting tripwires, invisible to the amateur eye, but glaringly obvious to a trained professional. Upstairs, the pressure from Thomas and Sarah continued. They called several times, their voices increasingly desperate, threatening legal action themselves if I didn't cooperate. I answered each call with the same calm resolve, reiterating my refusal. "Dad, Horizon Logistics' legal team is already reviewing the preliminary agreement," Thomas warned, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. "They're talking about penalties. We could lose everything." "Then perhaps you should have considered that before you signed away my home without my consent," I replied, my voice even, almost bored. "My position remains unchanged. I am not signing. This house will stand." Sarah tried a different tack, arriving unannounced one afternoon with a stern-faced woman in a business suit, a lawyer, no doubt. She spoke in legal jargon, mentioning contractual obligations, duress, and mental competency. I merely listened patiently, then asked her to leave, stating that I would seek my own counsel if they continued their harassment. The lawyer seemed surprised by my lucidity, exchanging a wary glance with Sarah before reluctantly departing. They truly believed I was an old fool. Let them. Their underestimation was my greatest advantage. Each subtle adjustment in the sub-basement, each piece of geological and historical data I compiled, was another nail in the coffin of their grandiose scheme. The spring, once a forgotten quirk, was becoming a silent, powerful ally. Its steady drip, drip, drip from beneath the workshop floor was no longer just the sound of water, but the rhythmic pulse of my defense, a counterpoint to the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down to their inevitable disillusionment. My work was meticulous, a grand clockwork plan unfolding with quiet precision. I had 3 weeks, I would use every second of it. The stage was being set. The days blurred, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall a meticulously measured beat in the rhythm of my counteroffensive. My workshop, usually filled with the delicate sounds of gears and springs, was now a strategic command center. This wasn't merely about preventing demolition. It was about orchestrating a grand reveal, a carefully timed cascade of discoveries that would dismantle Horizon Logistics' plans from within, turning their due diligence against them. I was no longer just a clockmaker. I was an architect of inevitability, shaping the flow of information with the precision of a master craftsman setting the escapement of a priceless timepiece. My mind, usually occupied with miniature tolerances, now grappled with geological strata and legal precedents, each piece a crucial component in the elaborate mechanism I was building. My focus returned to the sub-basement, my subterranean ally. The faint, steady drip, drip, drip of the unearthed spring was a constant reassurance, a quiet pulse beneath the very foundations they intended to destroy. My work down there was a delicate dance between enhancement and concealment. I continued to meticulously clear the area around the spring's emergence, not with crude digging, but with the careful hand of an archaeologist. I polished the mineral deposits on the surrounding rock face, making them gleam faintly in the lantern light, an undeniable visual cue for any trained eye. I deepened the subtle, natural channel the water had carved over centuries, creating a more pronounced flow into the small, newly formed pool. This wasn't about creating a new feature. It was about making an ancient one impossible to overlook. I also thought about ground-penetrating radar. I subtly loosened a few specific, deeper rocks around the main fissure, creating minute, almost imperceptible air pockets that would register as anomalies on a GPR scan, hinting at the subterranean water's true extent without revealing its precise nature immediately. It was like subtly misaligning a single gear in a complex clock. The system wouldn't halt, but it would begin to exhibit unexpected, escalating errors. Upstairs, the cacophony of my children's panic served as a contrasting counterpoint to my quiet resolve. Thomas's voice, a constant presence on the answering machine, grew hoarser with each call, laced with genuine fear. "Dad, they've sent a formal notice. Horizon Logistics is threatening penalties, enormous penalties. They're saying breach of contract. They'll sue us for millions, Dad. Do you understand? Millions." Sarah, ever the poised one, preferred unannounced visits, her facade of calm barely concealing her raw anxiety. "Dad, this isn't a game. They're deploying their legal team. They're not just threatening. They're acting. We need your signature. Now, before it's too late for all of us." Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, now flickered with a desperate plea, an attempt to weaponize my paternal instincts once more. But their pleas fell on deaf ears. I saw through the performance, the transparent self-interest, with a clarity sharpened by betrayal. My answer remained unwavering, delivered with a calm that infuriated them. "My position is clear. I will not sign, and this house will not be demolished." My research in Eleanor's study continued to bear fruit. I spent hours cross-referencing old topographical maps with contemporary satellite imagery, tracing the probable path of the subterranean spring. Eleanor's meticulous notes, filled with arcane geological terms and historical anecdotes, revealed tantalizing hints of an extensive underground network of water flows beneath this precise region. I found references to an unusually active karstic system, a type of limestone landscape prone to underground rivers and sinkholes that directly underpinned our property. This was far more than just a spring. It was a potential hydrological nightmare for a large-scale industrial development. Furthermore, a faded clipping from a local newspaper, tucked inside a heavy geology textbook, detailed a decades-old controversy surrounding a regional aquifer, the Willow Creek Aquifer, that was deemed a critical water source for several small towns downstream. The article mentioned its unmapped tributaries and the stringent environmental protections surrounding it. The hair on my arms prickled. If my spring was indeed an unmapped tributary of the Willow Creek Aquifer, Horizon Logistics would not merely face delays, they would face a formidable legal and environmental blockade, potentially rendering the entire project environmentally unfeasible. This house, this venerable old mechanism, was revealing its deepest secrets, not to destroy me, but to defend itself, and me, its keeper. Eleanor's ghost seemed to whisper encouragement from the dusty bookshelves, her quiet intellect echoing in the discoveries I was making. We had always treated the house's quirks with affection. The damp corner in the basement, the odd pressure drop in the well, never fully understanding their significance. Now, those quirks were becoming formidable weapons, each piece of evidence a finely honed component in my grand design. I even considered a subtle way to highlight the potential for localized flooding if the spring was capped or diverted improperly. A few well-placed absorbent sponges left innocently near the lowest point of the exposed sub-basement, perhaps filled with a non-toxic dye that would visually emphasize water flow when discovered. A small, almost invisible detail, yet one that could lead to a dramatic visual impact under scrutiny. The clock in the hall, its steady tick-tock now echoing like a drumbeat, marked the passage of the final days. Only 1 week remained until Horizon Logistics' full survey team was scheduled to arrive. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent hum of anticipation. Thomas and Sarah were frantic, their threats now mixed with increasingly desperate pleas. They saw a desperate old man clinging to a decrepit house. They failed to see the master craftsman who had meticulously wound the spring of his revenge, waiting for the precise moment of its release. The stage was set. The house had revealed its secrets, and I, its keeper, was ready to conduct the symphony of its defense. Every component was aligned, every contingency considered. The grand mechanism was fully wound, and the first chimes of its reckoning were about to sound. The final days stretched before me, each one a precious segment of the grand mechanism ticking towards confrontation. The hum of the workshop, usually a symphony of precision, was now a silent partner in my meticulous preparations. The air thrummed with the quiet tension of a spring wound to its absolute limit, ready for release. My primary focus remained the sub-basement. The steady drip, drip, drip of the unearthed spring had become the rhythm of my defiance, a constant reminder of the subterranean power I was about to unleash. I spent hours down there, not just clearing, but curating the scene. My hands, normally shaping brass and steel, now sculpted earth and rock with an artist's precision. I gently excavated a small, shallow trench leading from the spring's visible opening towards a subtle, natural depression in the earthen floor. This wasn't a crude ditch. It was designed to guide any flowing water, making its presence undeniable during a visual inspection. I also strategically positioned a few particularly striking geological samples, rocks embedded with unusual crystalline formations near the spring. These were not mere pebbles. They were visual cues, almost bait for a trained geologist, hinting at the unique, ancient nature of the water source. I even placed a few small absorbent pads, the kind used for spill containment in my workshop, inconspicuously near the edges of the dampened area. If any water were to be present when the team arrived, these would visibly wick it, subtly amplifying the evidence of perpetual moisture without appearing staged. Upstairs, the cacophony of my children's panic reached a fever pitch. Thomas's calls became incessant, his voice a strained, panicked whisper one moment, a hoarse, desperate shout the next. "Dad, they've sent another notice. They're initiating legal proceedings. Breach of contract, tortious interference, specific performance. The lawyers are saying millions, Dad, millions. They'll seize everything we own." His words were a frantic drumbeat of their impending financial ruin, each one an attempt to chip away at my resolve. Sarah, ever the strategist, opted for direct confrontation, appearing at my door with increasing frequency, her composure finally shattered. Her eyes, usually so calculating, now held a raw, desperate glint. "Dad, please, you don't understand the gravity of this. They'll ruin us. They'll take the house anyway, and then we'll be left with nothing. Is that what you want? To see your own children bankrupt and homeless?" She wielded my paternal love as a blunt instrument, trying to force my hand, but her transparent self-interest had long since dulled its edge. I met her gaze with a quiet, unyielding calm that infuriated her further. "My position, Sarah, remains unchanged. I will not sign, and this house will stand." My research, however, was providing a far more powerful retort than any spoken word. Eleanor's meticulous notes, once just a testament to her charming eccentricity, now provided irrefutable evidence. I found an old, faded map tucked away in a forgotten drawer of her desk, clearly marking the old Miller homestead, our property, as being directly over an unmapped but significant tributary of the Willow Creek aquifer. There was even a handwritten notation in Eleanor's elegant script, confirmed presence of unique limestone formations indicating potential karstic system activity. This was the linchpin. The Willow Creek aquifer was not merely a local water source, it was a designated critical ecological resource, protected by layers of stringent environmental legislation. Any disturbance, any risk of contamination, any attempt to build directly atop its main flow would trigger a legal and environmental nightmare for Horizon Logistics. They wouldn't just face delays. They'd face a potentially insurmountable regulatory wall, fines, and public outrage. It would render the property not merely unsuitable, but environmentally prohibited for their purposes. The clock in the hall, its steady tick-tock a relentless metronome of fate, marked the final hours. Tomorrow, the Horizon Logistics survey team was scheduled to arrive. I walked through the quiet house, touching Eleanor's framed photograph, running my hand over the polished wood of the grandfather clock. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the old walls was a part of me, a part of our shared history. They saw a burden. I saw a living entity, now prepared to defend itself. My old hands, so adept at repairing broken time, were now poised to repair a shattered future. The spring in the sub-basement pulsed with its ancient secret. The environmental laws lay waiting. The stage was set. I was ready. The morning dawned, crisp and silent, save for the rhythmic tick-tock dash of the grandfather clock in the hall. Today was the day. Today, the fate of my home, my workshop, my very legacy would be decided. A cold certainty settled in my bones, not of dread, but of quiet anticipation. I brewed a pot of strong tea, the familiar ritual a grounding force amidst the impending storm. I felt remarkably calm, a precision tool ready for its designated task. Around 9:00, the first vehicle appeared on the long driveway, a sleek black SUV, followed by a large van adorned with the Horizon Logistics logo. Then another, carrying what looked like a small tracked drilling rig. The quiet hum of the country morning was soon pierced by the murmur of voices, the clatter of equipment. The survey team had arrived. Thomas and Sarah, looking pale and strained, emerged from their own car, a luxury sedan that seemed incongruous with their current anxieties. They approached the house with forced smiles, trying to project an air of business as usual. Thomas gave a nervous wave to the men already unloading surveying poles and large metallic boxes. Sarah clutched her designer handbag, her knuckles white. "Dad," Thomas began, his voice surprisingly subdued, "the team's here." He eyed me, searching for any sign of wavering, any hint of the hysterics they still seemed to expect. I met his gaze steadily. "So I see. I trust you'll extend them every courtesy." My voice was even, devoid of the emotion they craved. It only served to heighten their unease. The team leader, a burly man with a clipboard and a no-nonsense expression, introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, the senior project manager. He was accompanied by a young woman in safety gear, a geologist, and two other men with heavy equipment. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," Henderson said, his tone professional, if a little curt. "We'll begin with surface readings, then move to ground-penetrating radar. We'll need access to the perimeter and, eventually, the basement areas for core samples." "Of course," I replied, my eyes subtly flicking towards the back wing of the house, where the sub-basement lay. The house has older sections. They can be a bit tricky to navigate. I offered the geologist, Mrs. Chen, a slight, knowing smile. Especially the foundations beneath the workshop. Very old stone. Might throw off your readings. Miss Chen's eyes, bright and intelligent, met mine. She gave a noncommittal nod, clearly accustomed to homeowners with eccentric knowledge of their properties. Thomas and Sarah exchanged a worried glance. My subtle hint had landed. The team fanned out, their work methodical. The GPR equipment hummed, emitting low-frequency waves into the earth, their data displayed on portable screens. I watched from the porch, a silent observer. Thomas and Sarah hovered nearby, their tension palpable. They paced, whispered, their carefully constructed confidence slowly crumbling. After an hour, Mr. Henderson and Miss Chen converged, their faces etched with professional concern. Miss Chen pointed to her screen, an overlay of jagged lines and peculiar blips. "The GPR is showing significant anomalies beneath the western wing, Mr. Henderson. Not just structural, but hydrological. Very complex signatures. It suggests high moisture content and possibly large voids or channels." Henderson frowned. "Hydrological? Are we talking about a burst pipe, Mr. Miller?" His gaze shifted to me, his tone sharper now. "Hardly," I said calmly, stepping closer. "The house has a very old sub-basement beneath the workshop, untouched for decades. It might be related." My internal mechanism clicked. It was time for the reveal. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "A sub-basement? That wasn't on the schematics we were provided." He shot a glare at Thomas and Sarah, who flushed guiltily. "It's very old," Sarah interjected, trying to sound dismissive. "Just a root cellar. Dad kept some old junk down there." "Indeed," I agreed pleasantly. "Perhaps Ms. Chen would like to see it herself, for a more accurate reading." My voice was innocent, but my eyes held a steel they couldn't penetrate. Ms. Chen, her scientific curiosity piqued, immediately nodded. "Yes, Mr. Henderson. If there are unmapped subterranean structures, we need to assess their composition and any potential water flow. It could significantly impact the foundation design." The unspoken implication hung heavy. Impact, meaning complicate, and complicate, meaning costly delays. I led them through the workshop, the familiar scent of oil and metal filling the air. Thomas and Sarah trailed behind, their faces pale, their earlier bluster replaced by growing dread. I reached the hidden door to the sub-basement, pulling it open. The stagnant, cold air wafted out, carrying the faint, unmistakable scent of damp earth and the quiet, persistent drip, drip, drip. Henderson and Ms. Chen exchanged a look as the sound echoed in the sudden silence. I handed Ms. Chen a powerful lantern. She descended the crude ladder first, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Henderson followed, muttering curses under his breath about incomplete documentation. Thomas and Sarah hung back, their faces a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. "Oh my," Ms. Chen's voice echoed from below, tinged with professional awe. "This is remarkable." I descended slowly, watching her. Her lantern beam illuminated the scene I had so meticulously curated. The spring, now flowing steadily into the cleared basin, shimmered. The moss-covered walls, the unique mineral deposits I'd subtly emphasized, the absorbent pads, now visibly damp. It was all there, undeniable. The cold, raw air bit at our exposed skin. The rhythmic drip, drip, drip was louder here, more insistent. Miss Chen knelt, examining the spring, her fingers brushing the cold, clear water.